Well, hello and welcome to the Hey Boomer Show, the show for those of us who believe that we are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. My name is Wendy Green, and I am your host for Hey Boomer. And today, as you know, we're talking about grandparent-grandchild travel. And I wanted to tell you a story about the first grandchild trip that I took. It was my granddaughter Grayson, and she was only 10 at the time. And we went to Mammoth Cave in Kentucky. And if you've never been there, it is a national park, and it's pretty amazing that this is one of the, if not the largest cave system in the country, maybe the world. But anyway, we're maneuvering, following the guide through this cave, hearing all the stories about what's in the cave and how they used it during the Civil War. And we made it through Fat Man's Misery, which is a very narrow passageway. And we made it through Tall Man's Misery, which is a very short, low passageway. And we got to a place in the cave where the guide said, okay, I'm going to turn off the lights so that you can experience how dark it is deep down here in the cave. But I will turn on my flashlight. But please, no flash photography. So at this point, Grayson is hanging very close, holding onto my hand, like, oh my gosh, what's coming? The lights go out. He turns on his flashlight, and I hold up my phone to take a shot. I was sure the flash was off on my phone. And the next thing I knew, big flash. And Grayson jumped like 2 feet back, let go of my hand, like, I don't know who this person is. So, traveling with grandparents can always be a challenge for grandchildren, but we survived, and it was a great trip. My guest today is Barb Klocko, but before I bring her on, I wanted to tell you about some of the Road Scholar opportunities, because you know that we love Road Scholar and they are my sponsor. So the one I wanted to talk about was Road Scholar's floating campus programs at sea. And these programs are fully chartered learning adventures at sea designed to feel like a college campus experience. So there are 7 different experiences, including sailing around and learning about the Greek Isles, voyaging among the wonders of Iceland, or floating down the Mississippi for a music and Mississippi tour. So if you'd like to learn more about what Road Scholar has to offer, you can go to roadscholar.org/heyboomer. Don't forget the /heyboomer, and then search floating campus adventures, and you can learn all about what other trips besides the 3 that I mentioned. So that's roadscholar.org/heyboomer. The other thing I wanted to do was invite you to the Hey Boomer private Facebook page. That's where we have good discussions and where we come together to share stories and inspiration and ask questions and have quotes of motivation and poems that people share. And it's a safe place where you can go with like-minded people at the same age category that we are, and you're not being bombarded by all the other Facebook noise. So if you'd like to join our private Facebook group, you can just go to facebook.com/groups/heyboomer and ask to join, and I will be glad to let you in. Okay, so with that, I am going to bring Barb on and read her bio, a little bit about her, so that you can meet her. Hello, Miss Barb.
Hi there, how are you?
I am good. I'm so excited that we're doing this show together.
I know, it was one of those things. Oh, yeah, we'll do that sometime.
And here it is.
Sometime.
It's sometime, right? It's 5 o'clock somewhere, as Jimmy Buffett used to say. All right, so Barb's philosophy is to live with courage, confidence, and commitment. and to inspire others to achieve beyond their expectations. I just love that. Woven through her life's journey has been a focus on education in all aspects of society. Barb started as an art teacher in a rural Michigan community, and during those 32 years, she taught art, served as a high school assistant principal, was a director of special education, a director of community education, an elementary school principal, early education program director, and director of administrative services. And she finished up her PhD as she was retiring. So, from being president of her first grade class to testifying in Washington, D.C. on pay equity, Barb has always focused on helping people to find the best in themselves. She served as president of Michigan Business and Professional Women's Foundation for 8 years and on the Michigan Education Trust Board of Directors. Her recent foray into education is as a tenure-track professor at Central Michigan University, where Barb has made significant contributions to the literature regarding the importance of educational leaders finding their voice. She has taught just about every course in the doctoral program and the doctoral curriculum, but her favorite has been philosophy. And I want to finish up with Barb telling me that she's not an advocate of having a bucket list because she believes that limits you to things that are on the list. But she never would have put be on a podcast on the bucket list. And yet here she is. So with all of that, you can see why Barb and I hit it off so well. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It was quite an experience, and I'm not sure, when we were thinking about doing the trip, I'm not sure I had any sort of expectations. Did you?
Yeah, that's interesting because this was my fourth one. And I do, yeah, I think, and if my mother's listening, she'll tell me expectations always lead to disappointment. So don't have expectations. But I do have expectations when I go on these trips. And I think the expectation is to build memories, to have that one-on-one time with them, to get to know them as individuals outside of, their parents who are kind of always monitoring the relationship. And maybe for them to get to know me, and I don't know that that's an appropriate, but I think it is in some ways, I do want them to know me.
And it's very different from the way we grew up and our relationship with our grandparents.
For sure, for sure. Did you spend much time with your grandparents getting to know them or having them getting to know you?
Going to my grandmother's, and my grandfather's for a couple of years before he passed on, was our only vacation that we took. And it was, Dad had 1 week off of work, and we'd leave on Saturday night after work, and that was our vacation, was going to her. And she never, I think she came down for a period of time at one time, but people didn't take vacations back then. It wasn't or maybe it was just our family, or maybe it was just vacations were thought of as privilege.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the working class just didn't do that.
Yeah. My experience was a little bit different. My grandparents used to go on cruises a lot, but we lived in Miami, so it was easy to hop on a cruise. They didn't have to take a plane or anything. So they would go on cruises a lot. They did take me one time when I was 14, and it was really a terrible experience, which I don't really want to go into here. But it's interesting that I would have wanted to. So I'm going to use the word desperately. I so desperately wanted to have one-on-one time with each grandchild that I made a commitment to myself that I was going to take a trip with them. And, you know, I'm certainly not a rich person, so I couldn't do like these big, I know people that take their kids to wherever they want to go in the world. You know, that's not what I do, but just to have that one-on-one time was really important to me.
It's kind of strange. That just made me think of before the kids went away to college, or in my son's case, he went to the military right after high school, and I said, "Well, you get a mom and me trip, you know, wherever you want to go within reason," and did a real nice trip out west to Mount Hood for for my oldest daughter or for my daughter, and my son negotiated to get money for car parts.
Instead of a trip.
Yeah.
How did you feel about that?
I felt kind of relieved because he probably would have had me jumping out of a plane or tearing apart a car or doing something or other. You
If you
can't
didn't have,
treat them equally. I've always said you can't treat kids or grandchildren equally, but you can treat them equitably because you can give them what they need when they need it.
yeah,
So,
because you mentioned that, like you took Will on the
yeah,
Windjammer trip that I took Alex on. That's where we met.
yeah,
Um, but you have two granddaughters, and you went on a trip with them this summer, but with your daughter also, right?
yes, and my sister.
And your
It
sister.
was a phenomenal trip. Yeah, I mean, it was great. It was still physically challenging for me because I have a real hard time walking, um, like lots of steps and stuff. But we went to a spa. We were on we stayed at the Grand Hotel in Mackinac Island, and
Nice,
it
nice.
was it was it was perfect for them because it wasn't far from their house. It was like, so it wasn't a big.
Like you had equitable time with the granddaughters compared to the time you had with Will on the Windjammer?
You know, it was kind of strange because on the Windjammer, and we talk about, or even in the booklet, it says make monumental memories, go on these grandparent and family adventures, which I sort of thought we'd have more time with the kids. The kids found their own groove almost immediately.
They did.
And so I didn't have to worry about overstepping my bounds or saying no, you can't do that, or I didn't have to parent at all. I got to grandparent, which was like, oh yeah, come on, sit down, let's have some dinner.
Do you remember the one time I did parent? I insisted Alex take a shower the night before we were going to leave because I didn't want him to be all stinky on the plane on the way home. And and when he came up from the cabin and out, all the other kids had jumped into the water to go swimming, and I was like, "Oh no!" So of course I couldn't be the baddie, and I said, "Okay, go swim." So
And
that
the
was
water was freezing.
freezing. They didn't care.
No, no,
They didn't care. But that was the only time I grandparented.
yeah,
I mean, I parented on that trip. Yeah. Yeah. But you're
yeah,
right. And that's one of the things I do love about the Windjammer experience is that they keep the kids so occupied and educated, but
Yeah,
in
and inspired, I think. I
mhm.
will read you something from my journal.
Speaking of journals,
Speaking of journals.
while you're looking for it, I'll tell you, I always
Okay.
ask the kids to keep a journal when we travel. And the girls were like, yeah, cool, let's do that. The boys, not so much. So I would ask them at night, so what should I put in my journal? What do you want to write about for today? So they would help me think about it, but they wouldn't write.
Okay. As we were tacking back into Carver Cove, the rain came down and the crew expertly brought us to safety. Do you ever think of safe harbor? What are our safe harbors, and who do we trust to help us on our journey? There's another journey every day and another person to trust, either as a mentor or as a peer. Wisdom comes from the journey. We do not bring wisdom into the journey, lest we be disappointed and we do not find the spontaneity of discovery.
Wow. That's, yeah. I never
So,
wrote anything that good in my journal.
oh, I had plenty of, oh my God, the food was great.
But safe harbor, who do you trust? Who's your mentor? And we were talking before we came on about the layers of the different generations, you know?
Absolutely. And our kids, our grandkids, don't really have the opportunity to know whether to trust us, because they travel a lot with their parents. So, and they know their routine. They know that, okay, I'm going to be able to do this and this and this. But I think they know at the end of the day that we're going to keep them safe
Yeah.
and not sticky when
Yeah,
they
I
get
think
in the plane.
I think, we were talking about like with our parents and our grandparents, we never would have spoken back. We never would
No,
have treated them with anything but respect. And yet, as parents, the way we were told to parent was that, give your kids choices and that they can say what they're feeling. We wanted them to be expressive. And so, they might say, oh, I don't like you, you're so mean. And we'd be like, okay, well, too bad. It's still the rule. But I think it has changed through the generations where it's easier now for the young ones to make a snarky remark or, not remember to say please and thank you sometimes. And, it's just different.
I was really impressed with the kids in how they reacted and respected all of the crew members, the cooks. They did. I mean, they were amazing, and they were amazing to. I mean, like I talked to Alex a little bit, and I tried to talk to as many of the kids as I could. If you could ever catch them not
One
up
on
on
one.
the deck sunbathing or.
Right.
Um, but I think that they don't have a lot of elders to guide their life. Some do, some don't. But I remember as a principal, I would get kids who were living with their grandparents because their parents either kicked them out or whatever the situation was, and it was always a very different kind of relationship. And
What was different about it?
it was different. I think that they felt like it was a last resort. He was getting in trouble in his school and everything. You go live with grandma. And then, you know, the whole role of being a grandmother, I know people who babysit
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
6 years.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can't even imagine that
Yeah.
back in the day. And I can't, and I know how expensive it is for childcare, but it's still, it's a very, it's very different to be called on in your role as a grandparent or as a pseudo parent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
So
that's
do
why I love this trip, is because I could be a grandparent and I didn't have to, you know, I didn't have to say, okay, kids, time for bed, get in your bunks. It's like, oh, cool.
I guess that was me too. I did when they were down in where the crew slept,
Yeah, yeah.
and they were playing and they were loud, and I finally went down there and said, "All right, guys, we need to come on up and go to bed because the crew needs to sleep." So I guess I was being the parent on the ship. I don't know. So what
Well,
do you think?
there were three things when I retired from my first job, my 32 years in K-12. I was never going to wear pantyhose again, and I haven't because I don't even think they make them anymore. I was never going to use an alarm clock,
Mm.
but I cheat and use my phone because I that's not an alarm clock, it's a phone if I have to get up or something. Or I tell Dan to shake
Wake
me
you
up.
up.
Yeah.
I know because he's an early riser. I used to
Yes.
see him on the deck
He
early.
he said to say hi to you today.
Thank you, Dan.
And the last thing was, and having been in all sorts of disciplinarian rules or roles, I was never going to feel like I had to be responsible for other people's behavior. And that is so uplifting that when it's
So
not my fault if those kids are making noise down there, it's their business.
so what do you do as a grandparent if you're one-on-one with your grandchild or even in the family situation and they're doing something that you feel like is disrespectful or saying something that is just way off the wall? How do you handle that?
Um, Probably kind of the way I handled it in a classroom. You take them take them out, and I mean, you don't take them out to the woodshed, but you take them out of the situation and then explain to them why it bothered me. Not that it was wrong or anything, but this is why, you know, when you say stuff like that, it might hurt. It's travel is very different because I mean you're held captive. Yeah, I mean, you can't just run off and go log on and talk to your friends. Oh my gosh. Watched this crazy movie last night. It was War with Grandpa.
Oh.
This kid, the grandpa was moving into the house, Robert De Niro, and so the kid had to give up his bedroom, and he didn't want to give up his bedroom, so he started all these pranks and everything on the war, and then the grandpa, of course, was much better at pranks, and he was doing pranks back on him, and of course it ended well, but it was
It's a weird movie, huh?
yeah, yeah, and but funny.
But funny.
But whenever you um, have more than two generations in a household or in a situation. There's so many different dynamics. Is interesting. I went to Japan on an educator's tour. Oh, I don't know. I guess about 15 years ago, and the family that I lived with, they have every generation that's alive still lives in the same house. It's very common within that culture that they all live within the same house. And the kids' behavior is so different there than at school, where, oh my gosh, they were sliding up and down banisters, and it was
Even at school in Japan, they were sliding up and down. Really? But at home, they were perfectly behaved.
yeah.
Interesting.
And they did something. Oh, they did some great things in the school, like um, the last hour of every day, they did community cleanup. So there were no custodians and there were no cooks or any of the ancillary staff within the school, because the kids did all they washed windows. They did. It's like, wow, this is
Wow.
really different. But then once they were outside of that, they were like,
So, what about that, though? That's interesting, the different generations living together. I mean, that would be more difficult here, do you think?
I think so. I think so. Did you ever have a grandparent living with you?
No.
No, we didn't either. I know a lot of people who did, and
Yeah. But
and I know
now,
a lot of people who say, "I will not move in with my children."
right, right. But I do think that we experience that, or at least I can speak for myself, that there is, and this is why it's so important to me to have the one-on-one, there is a barrier, and that's called the parent or my children between me and the grandchild. So
Let's call it
I,
a filter.
a filter, okay. It's better than a barrier, but I feel like there have been times where they'll correct me. They'll say, "Mom, you shouldn't say that," or "Mom, don't do that," or "Mom, we don't need to talk about that." I'm like, I get, and maybe this is my failure, that I take it personally to a certain extent, of saying, I was a good parent. Like, why do you think I'm going to be a bad grandparent? But I don't think that's what they're saying. I think what they're saying is, we want you to have a good relationship with the grandchildren, and we raise them this way, so follow the lead.
Oh, I know somebody who took her grandchildren to McDonald's and got read the riot act. I mean, the kids asked to go there, and got read the riot act by the parents.
Right, because we don't eat at that kind of place. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, when I took Grayson on our trip, the first one, there was nothing out there by Mammoth Cave except like a Kentucky Fried Chicken or a Waffle House,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
she'd never eaten at any place like that. So, yeah. And you know what else surprised me about this trip too, Barb, that we were on, is that those kids were not tied up on their phones.
No,
There's so much talk these days about all the kids being behind their phones. They were not.
no. And I let Will charge his on my charger, but that was one of the advantages of only having the only electricity in the boat was on a car battery, and so you had to be very scrupulous about it.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they didn't know that we got I got 5G service right off the all the while, pretty much all the while we were in the harbor.
In the harbor, yeah. But I think it's because they were they bonded so well. That was amazing. But also they were kept busy with a lot of activity.
Some of this stuff, though, they engineered themselves. The card playing, and they, I don't know what all, but
The jumping off of the mast netting or whatever that was. Yeah.
yes.
Into that freezing cold water. Yeah.
But I truly was impressed, and I think I started to say this before and I trailed off, but I was truly impressed that the kids were polite about the food, which I can't imagine a lot of youngsters having tuna steak for as an appetizer, and tuna tartare, excuse me, and being open to it.
No, they were great. And they were great about the
Going back
cleanup.
for seconds. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we had certain rules about cleanup because you're on a boat and you have to preserve the space and the cleanliness, and they were good about that too.
Yeah, they were. I sort of wonder about their expectations. They probably didn't expect that they were going to have to work all the time, but
Well, the Windjammer is a working boat. That's true. And I remember Alex saying, "You mean we have to work and we pay for it too?"
it's kind of like
Yeah.
student teaching.
They learned a lot, though. That was fun. Now, do you think you would go on another grandparent-grandchild trip?
Yeah, but I don't think I would do the same, and I don't think I don't know. We have a lake house up north, and so it's like, even though I'm still teaching, I teach online. Um, every day's a vacation, and so whenever we get people who come to the lake, it becomes maybe it's their vacation, but it's a little bit of that too. But I wanted to, in line with that, I wanted to. Do you remember these cards? The questions, there were questions for the grandparent and questions for the grandchild.
Oh, yeah.
Um, one of them just blew me away, that it said, for the grandchild, and this was Will's response to, what is your favorite memory with your grandparent? And he said, at the lake house fishing. And then
Aw.
Dan said, what is your favorite memory with Will? And he had fishing at the lake house.
Oh, how sweet.
And then the favorite tradition, Dan and Will had both had Christmas. Maybe they just copied from each other.
Maybe they did.
And I just had, we make gingerbread houses every Christmas. And they are
Aw.
horrible. They're miserable. They fall apart. We do better with a solder iron or stapler or glue gun. But it's always a hoot. And one year we made them out of wood and got kicked.
Oh,
And it was beautiful.
wow. Wow.
But just about every other year they're like,
Things to build memories with the kids.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
And I think,
it doesn't have to be elaborate. It doesn't have to be over the top.
yeah,
Because
right.
then you say, well, who am I doing this for? Am I doing this, or why am I doing this? I'm not doing this for anybody. I'm doing it with my grandchildren, and I'm just looking for, I don't know, it doesn't have to be appreciation. It's relationships,
Relationships.
It
Right.
really is.
Have they ever asked you about your history or your ancestors? Like, where did your family come from?
Yeah, yes, nothing too exciting, but
But, that's the kind of thing that sometimes you get to, our age and our parents or our grandparents have passed and you never had that conversation with them.
yeah, yeah. And sometimes you don't know what you want, what you don't know what you need. until it's
Yeah.
gone.
So,
Uh,
right. There's a song about that.
yeah,
But that's why I think like I did go in with expectations of getting to know them and taking away any kind of, or building the trust, let's say, building that trusting relationship. Um, so that at some point, if they want to ask those kinds of things, they would feel like, yeah, we can ask, because I guess, I'm thinking about like old, right? So when we think of our grandparents, when we were 13, John and Will's age, they were
they were
old,
old. They
right?
were old when we were 2.
Do you think our grandchildren think of us as old?
I hope so, because otherwise they've got some. It's weird because when we go out with peers, people our own age, what do we talk about doctor's appointments, we talk about ailments, and then when we skip that generation down to grandchildren, they talk about Hogwarts and they talk about you know crazy uh, video
Podcasts
games.
that they listen to, right? Or video games, or yeah.
Yeah, and so it's kind of nice when you can find that middle ground and make peace with all 3 generations that are around. And
I
there,
don't,
in some cases there's 4, but
right.
unfortunately not for us anymore.
Yes. Well, we do have 4. My mother's still with us, so it's amazing.
Oh, good for you. Just appreciate every day and
Yeah.
accept her for where she's at right now, not who she was back then.
Right. Yeah. But again, thinking about old, like I don't think of myself as old, so it's weird for me to think that they think of me as old. But I did ask one day, I said, how old do you think old is? They said 70. I'm like, oh,
Oh,
okay. Well, I guess I'm old.
I used to think old was 26. The
Yeah.
Before we talked and you asked about my weekend, and I said, yeah, it was rather transactional, or rather, and
Not transformational.
not transformational. But now, as I think about it, a little bit of it was because we went to a baptism yesterday for I guess he would be my niece's son. So, yeah, so just a great nephew. And I was looking at all of everybody in the church, and I was like, oh my gosh, these are babies having babies, and these were watch them grow up and encourage them and nourish them along the way and everything. And here they are. It's the next generation, and how do you pass the baton to the next generation? Like, oh, you want to get a plate for grandma? Okay, you can do that. Rather than, oh, grandma's got to cook this and do this and do this and do that. But it's that sense of, oh, okay, I will tell you this. This was a strange story. We were out west and we had rented some, I don't know if they were 4-wheelers or 3-wheelers, might have been 4-wheelers. And we were going through the mountains and stuff. And we stopped on this one cliff. And I was talking to this little girl or something like that. And she said, oh, I said, oh, you look like you're maybe going to start school this year. And she said, well, how do you know? And I said, well, I'm a grandma, so I know that sort of thing. And she said, well, I knew you were a grandma. And I said, really? How'd you know? She said, have you looked at your hands?
Uh-huh.
It's like,
They will tell you like it is,
yeah,
right?
yeah, they're old.
Yeah. So
So,
if
but
you could,
being old isn't a curse.
It's not a curse. Yes. So if you could summarize the joys of being a grandparent and traveling and the challenges of being a grandparent and traveling, what would you say?
What would I say? Well, I think that it goes back to that intergenerational mix that we talked about. And the more we bring that into our lives, we bring some of the vitality of youth that we long to pretend we still are. Or we also have the sense, if it's with an elder parent, caring for an elder parent, we have that sense of trust and permanence, and goes back to that safe harbor.
Mm.
And who do you trust to take you into the safe harbor and be a mentor, or be your bestie? It's like, I was so happy that Dan went along on the trip, and we never even considered just one of us going.
Yeah, and I think it is a little different when you have the two of you than with your traveling solo with them, because you
I
are
think,
responsible for everything then.
right.
But I think for me, the joy is having that time to really, even just watching them, learning more about who they are and who they are becoming.
How they've grown. Oh my gosh, Will has grown
Well,
so
he was
tall,
so
fast.
tall. I
Yeah.
know. And
But
I guess the challenges for me anyway was, sometimes knowing where the line is between being the parent and the grandparent, because I do feel like, you have to monitor behavior when there's a lot of other adults around, and you don't want to disturb people, like come up, it's time to let the staff sleep.
yeah.
But I think the challenge also is physical, like Alex and I did a hike, and thank God he was there, because I needed help coming back down over those rocks on that little island where we did the lobster bake.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't venture there because I knew my whole right leg is weird. Like, I don't know why,
Yeah.
but I can't go up steps and without using my arms and the handrails and
Yeah,
everything.
and it was a tough hike, so
Yeah.
thank God
And
he was
so,
there
yeah,
to help me. And I think it was good for him to realize that, I was willing to do it and try it, but he also felt good knowing that he could help me, So I think that was a good experience for both of us. If people want to follow up with you with any questions about the
oh,
trip
sure.
or with what you're doing, they can email you at Klocko, that's KLOCKO @gmail.com. And you can just tell her how much you enjoyed her presence on this podcast.
Well, let me just tell you this. You wanted to know if I wanted to sum it up. Relationships are all there is in this world.
In fact, last week we were talking about uncluttering, and one of the things was, relationships come before things. So,
Oh, yeah. I used to always ask my kids when they were arguing about a toy or something, what's more important, people or things?
that's right.
Things.
Things, right? That's what kids say, right? Okay, so if you want to learn about this Windjammer trip that we took, or any other Road Scholar trips, you can go to on the Angelique. You can go to roadscholar.org/heyboomer. And if you'd like to be part of our Facebook private group, just go to facebook.com/groups/heyboomer. We would love to have you in our group. So next week, we are continuing on the theme of the focus on the family, but we're going to be moving from the joy of grandparent-grandchild relationships to the pain of family estrangement. It's kind of a hidden pain because most people don't talk about it, but my guest will be Dr. Josh Coleman. He's a practicing psychologist and author of the book, Rules of Estrangement: Why Adult Children Cut Ties and how to heal the conflict. Dr. Coleman is uniquely qualified to speak on this topic as he was estranged from his daughter for years, and they have since reconciled. So we're going to talk about family estrangement in general, such as sibling estrangement and even grandparent estrangement, as well as the parent-child. I thought the book was well done, very insightful. So could be a little uncomfortable conversation, but it should be interesting. And I always like to leave you with the belief that we can live with courage, we can live with relevance, and we can live with passion. And remember that you are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. My name is Wendy Green. Thank you, Barb.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
And this has been Hey Boomer.